Hey, church family. I wanted to follow up a little bit with a couple of verses that we used in our sermon yesterday. It's a verse that's very near and dear to my heart, so if you've been around Crossroads any number of Sundays, then you've probably heard me say it and talk about it and go on and on about it. But I quoted from Habakkuk 2. Verse 14 is the verse that I'm referring to, and it says, "For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of God as the waters cover the sea." We use that all the time at Crossroads. It's a promise of God. It's repeated, or it's mentioned in Numbers 14, where God says, "I swear by my name, as I live, the knowledge of the glory of God will cover the earth as the waters cover the sea." It's repeated in Isaiah. It's repeated in the New Testament. It's one of these verses that proliferates Scripture, and it's a promise that God says one day this earth that you stand on, this earth that you live on, this earth that you call home, this earth that you are either doing good to or ill to, this earth that you are either helping me take or not helping me take, this earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of God as the waters cover the sea. In other words, it will be completely saturated. All will know. And this theme is repeated throughout Scripture. Many of you have probably heard me go on about this, but I linked it to verse 4 in Habakkuk, where God is essentially talking to his people about his end game, and that's where that comes in. The knowledge of the glory of God will cover the earth as the waters cover the sea. You ask, well, how will that come about? How will that be? And verse 4 kind of gives the key to understanding how that comes about, where it says, "The righteous shall live by faith." So ordinary, everyday Christians living out their faith in the world that God has placed them. Light overcomes darkness, good overcomes bad. The faithfulness of Christians wins this world. And I just want to draw a couple of lines for you. We've talked over the last couple of Sundays about the covenant that God made with Abram. And in Genesis chapter 12, we read the first couple of verses. It says, "Now the Lord said to Abram, 'Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I'll make of you a great nation, and I will bless those who make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and to him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth will be blessed.'" We're studying through Galatians right now, and Paul makes a big deal about this promise, that through Abraham, all the families of the earth will be blessed. And Paul is making the argument in Galatians that it's through his offspring, through his son of promise, who Paul says is Christ, that all the nations of the earth will be blessed. And I want you to understand how the apostles interpreted that. Okay, so the apostles, when we look at how the New Testament interprets the Old Testament, it gives us the blueprint for how we should understand those passages. In other words, if your interpretation of Genesis 12 differs with Paul's right, right? If I differ with the way that Peter, for example, if my understanding of the prophecies in Joel differ from how Peter understands the prophecies of Joel when he stands up at the day of Pentecost and says these things are being fulfilled in your sight, if my interpretation differs with Peter's right. If my interpretation differs from Paul's is right. Same with all of the New Testament authors. But I want you to understand how the Apostle Paul understood that. Look at Romans chapter 4, verse 13. "For the promise to Abraham and his offspring that he would be heir of the world did not come through the law, but through the righteousness of faith." Now that verse in itself is very applicable to what we've been studying in the book of Galatians, but notice what happened there. Paul is saying that the promise that through Abraham all the families of the earth will be blessed actually translates into a promise that Abraham would be heir of the whole earth, that he would inherit the whole earth. And he says that promise to Abraham is for us by faith. So we have been promised the world. Well, what does that look like? Well, it relates back to Habakkuk 2. That the knowledge of the glory of God will cover the earth as the waters cover the sea. That's a promise that Christians inherit this earth, that there's a lastingness and an everlastingness to this earth, and that it's the righteous living by faith that helps us to secure our inheritance. Where's Paul getting that Well, first of all, it doesn't matter. It's under the inspiration of Scripture. Paul said it. That's how that's to be understood. But it's really interesting if you go to Matthew chapter 5, verse 5, where Jesus says, the meek shall inherit the earth. He's actually quoting from Psalm 37. And Psalm 37 is all about the promise that God made to give his people a land. And it talks about how God will continually promise, if his people are faithful, to uproot the wicked from the land and allow the meek to inherit the land. And then Christ, who is the faithful one, who by his own work makes us all faithful, comes along and changes that promise, not to the meek inherit the land, but to the meek inherit the earth. And so I say all that just to show you the significance of what Paul is arguing for in the book of Galatians, is that if we understand the gospel and the power of the gospel and the benefits of the gospel, then we understand that we are the heirs, we are the inheritors of this entire earth. And if we actually, if Christians across the globe got a glimpse of what that's like, that one of the reasons COVID-19 matters to us and government reactions to it and people's liberation from the fear of it and all those kinds of things, one of the reasons that matters to us is because this earth is our inheritance. One of the reasons Christians ought to be leading the way in environmentalism is because this earth is our inheritance. One of the reasons we should care about the state of the world and the news of the world and what's going on in the world and the justice that's applied in the world is because this earth is our inheritance. Whenever we show disdain, indifference, or a lack of care for the future of this earth, the people on it, the government structures that are in place, the culture that it's creating, the physical earth itself, we're like Esau, who sold off his birthright, who hated his inheritance. We must love this earth. We must love the culture on it. That doesn't mean that it doesn't need to be revamped, that things need to be conquered, that things need to be placed underneath the feet of Jesus in victory, according to 1 Corinthians 15. But we love this earth because of the everlasting nature of it and because this earth is our inheritance. So we have to take very, very seriously what happens with it and be part of God's solution for bringing about the knowledge of his glory to cover the earth as the waters cover the sea. Hope that's encouraging to you. We're going to look at Psalm 2 tomorrow, which is one of my favorite Psalms, and see how that applies to this very same theme. May the Lord be with you.